Welcome back.
Welcome to Decision Space, the only show to take place right here in the space between the turns in your favorite games. I'm Jake Friedman.
And I'm Brendan Hansen.
And this is the podcast about decisions in games.
And in this week's episode of Decision Space, we're going on vacation. Pack your bags, Jake, and more importantly, pack up your boxes or disassemble your boxes into bags and chuck them in the suitcase because we're going to be talking vacation games. It's August.
Woo!
It's sunny. Jake's been on a vacation. I'm about to go on a vacation. So it just felt apropos. I think many of you are probably going to be going on vacations. We wanted to talk about what is a vacation game? What makes for a good vacation game? What are you thinking about? What are the decisions you're making when it comes to picking games to take on vacation? Also, what games are Jake and I taking on vacation this year?
What if somebody's on their way to vacation right now listening to this? Like they're on a flight and they downloaded this beforehand, or they're driving their car on the way to the airport, or just on a road trip and they're like literally on vacation and they're listening to this.
That's amazing. That has to happen at least once, I would think.
I would think it's possible.
Yeah. And in that case, this is going to be about what you should do when you land. Immediately go to a game store and what games you should pick up.
Yeah, this is just for you, special listener. We're speaking directly to you and you alone. Hey, Brendan, before we get into this conversation, I just wanted to do something that I always love to do when we get the chance, which is read out a review. So we just got a really nice review on Apple Podcasts from Dan Bosu. The title of the review is "A Must Listen for People Who Like Playing Games." 5 stars. And then the review is, "This is a great podcast to learn about games or more about games you already love to play. The hosts are informative and fun to listen to." Short, sweet, beautiful. Thank you so much, Dan, for that kind review.
Oh, you love to hear it. Thank you so much. Okay, so let's get into it, Jake. What makes a good vacation game? Like, what are the qualities that you think about when I know you have that ritual, right? You're going to go on vacation, you're thinking about it through the week, and you're sort of mentally making a stack of games, but ultimately you have to make the stack. You have to go to your collection and sort of pick out the different games that you're going to put into a bag or disassemble to take with you. So what's going through your mind? What are some of the qualities that might make a certain game fit for your vacation for you that other games don't fit at all?
When I think about this question, and I'm thinking about vacations that are not game focused, right? This is not going to Gen Con. This is not going to the Gamers Ranch or a cabin with a bunch of friends where you're mostly just going to be like hanging out and playing games. This to me is more like, exploring a new city with friends or with family. So the games that I'm looking to bring, I think the number one criteria for me are games that are a small footprint on the table, small footprint in the suitcase, and then also just games that you can kind of play like when the moment arrives, right? So there's a very small teach and you're just like up and playing, right? Like, okay, we're sitting around waiting for food, or, we had just finished dinner, had a drink, and maybe we're back at the Airbnb and want to hang out a little bit before bed. It's like games that can fill those little small spots and just like insert a little bit of fun to your vacation without it being like, I'm like really like exerting energy to teach and like get a game in front of people. Like I want games that are just like naturally going to happen.
Yeah, I feel like, I was thinking for me, oftentimes when games happen when I'm on vacation, like you said, I'm not necessarily in the mindset of I'm going to be teaching this game to people who play games all the time. Usually the audience is a little bit broader if I'm with family where they enjoy games, but maybe they're not seeking out games on their own. So oftentimes that means we're not structuring whole days around playing games on vacation. We're doing other things. So what kind of games do I want to play maybe before going out to do other things in the morning or in the afternoon? We have 45 minutes before dinner after we got back from some activity. What game could fit nicely in there? Or if it's the end of the day, is there a game that's going to be easy enough to get the teach out, but compelling enough that people want to stick around and play that game? Especially in my life now that like the kids are asleep, we're all tired. What game is going to be exciting enough that people want to play a game?
Right.
Yeah.
As opposed to just like hitting
being a potato. Exactly. Yeah. And I think you nailed it too. Compact is huge. Especially if you're flying, like that can be a really big consideration. And then for me, I feel like I never know what kind of table I'm going to have on vacation. So sometimes I'll bring a bigger game, just hoping that there's the right play space, but knowing that I need some things that maybe this game mostly happens, it's mostly a card game where you could kind of play it anywhere. Another thing that you didn't mention that I definitely, two other things, I guess. One is I think player count flexibility is good, because if you're playing a game with someone and then someone else on the trip with you sort of sees it, I like to be able to say, yeah, play with us. We'll play another game of this game, rather than like, oh, this is a 2-player game. It doesn't really play well at 3. Let's learn this other new game. Sometimes that can be a bit too much. So Maya and I were talking about what games we should bring, and we are like, oh, let's not bring too many 2-player games, because other people can't just hop in or hop out.
Like, just think about who you're traveling with, because a lot of times if I'm traveling with just my wife, Bridget, then we'll only bring 2-player games, because
right.
There's only 2 people. And a lot of times, I think we differ from you and Maya in that we don't typically play a ton of games on our own, like just 2 players. So a lot of the gaming that we do together is also with other friends, other people coming over and hanging out. So a lot of times, like, vacation for us is an opportunity to get those 2-player games played that we would usually be opting for something else if we were going to set aside time for a game night.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I feel like it's funny that our sort of summary here is like, know your audience and pick games for your audience, but that's always the answer with games in a way, right? Like, the right games are the games that fit your audience better than maybe the games you're most excited to play. And the truly best games are the ones that hit both. Okay, my final criteria, and I want to hear how much you think about this too. Games that are memorable or create memorable experiences. How much do you sort of evaluate, like, this is a good game, but it might not leave a memorable impact? Sometimes I'm thinking about that, right? Like, I'll have a fun game that I know Maya and I like to play, but the memory is that, oh, we played this game 20 times and we really liked the iterative experience of learning it. And those games don't necessarily always translate the best to, we're going to play this game once. I'm thinking of something like modern art works really well, where you're just going to play a game one time. It's just like nice. It's not too long, but it feels like a full game. For people who haven't played sort of an auction style game like that before, I think it can be memorable, and it's approachable because the language of it, it's like, oh, we're art dealers in an art market. It kind of makes sense.
It's interesting there too, because I think my best vacation gaming experiences almost go the opposite direction, where it's like, I don't want to, I think we might talk about some of like our best vacation gaming memories towards the end, but I would just, so I don't want to spoil that conversation, but I will say, like, sometimes if you're in an exciting and new place, like, that's enough. And like, to be there and also just be playing something like really simple and light is enough. Because I haven't been to Paris, but like, if you're in Paris at like a cafe, hanging out, like, you're finally exploring this new city, new culture, like, you might not want to be totally like head down and involved in something. Even if you do want to play a game, it might be like, oh, this will be a great opportunity to play Love Letter, and we can sort of casually play this while still like taking in and appreciating like this amazing place that we are.
I think that that's a really good point too. When Maya and I were putting together the games we wanted to bring, she was like, well, are we talking about modern games or classic games that I want to bring? She's like, I like playing spades on vacation and Rummy Cub and bringing set. And I think that kind of fits into what you're sort of saying, where these are comfort games for people in Maya's family, at least, where it's easy to have them become this nice textured background to whatever you're doing. And it's sort of this like level playing field. Like, whereas if I'm teaching Maya's sister how to play a new game, it's a harder experience sometimes than, oh, we're just going to play spades and everyone at this table has played spades with everyone else before and we know how that goes.
Totally.
Which can be really fun too.
Right. And I think, like, again, I don't want this whole episode to be like, you should really think about your audience when you're picking games. But like, I do think we as gamers, sometimes it's hard to like fully go into the shoes of somebody you're teaching a game to who's less experienced, and like how mentally exerting it is to learn a new game, even a game that we would consider like a very light game. And like, when you're on vacation, even though, vacation's amazing, great, like, it can be really exerting. Like, you're in a new place, you're tired, you've been probably spending a lot more time on your feet than is typical in your daily like work day. So I just think, like, getting to the end of the day, if you can put something in front of someone that they've played before, like, wow, what a bonus.
Totally.
For them and their experience.
Yeah, it's learning a new game while sunburned is like one of the worst ways to learn a new game, for sure. Yeah, I feel like that it's a good summary, I feel like, of a lot of the things that I'm typically thinking about. Also, bonus points if you've traveled with a group before and you have a game that you remember everyone loved. Sometimes it's fun to sort of bring that back out and say, do you remember when we played this on that other trip? I found that can work really well sometimes too. And maybe it's a game I haven't played in a long time and it's fun to revisit.
Totally. Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a great point.
Okay. Do you want to pivot to, Jake, memories or games that we're taking on vacations or have taken on vacations this summer?
Let's do some like memories now. Just do a little introspection, and then we'll close out the episode by giving some recommendations for great travel games and stuff that we personally have enjoyed on our trips this summer or plan to enjoy in the very near future, in your case.
Yeah, that sounds great. Okay, do you want to kick us off?
Sure. So the first thing that comes to mind, and this is the thing I was just thinking about before, was one thing I always like to do on vacation when possible is stick my head in a game shop. And I know a lot of people in this hobby also enjoy doing that. Even if typically a lot of, the friendly local game stores around the country and world carry the same type of stuff, it's still fun just to like be in a space that's comfortable and fun for you to browse around, and then picking up something, even if it's a game you could have gotten back home, like just knowing that you got that souvenir game there makes it like really special. Like my copy of The Mind is in Dutch because I got it in Amsterdam when I was there on a vacation.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and so that just it's a game that just has numbers on cards. So pretty language independent, I would say, but just like knowing that I have that like Dutch rule book or whatever is pretty cool to me. But anyway, in the same place I got The Mind, I also picked up the game 21, which is a roll and write game in the same genre of Quicks, like same idea where the active player is like rolling dice. It's been a while since I played, so I might not be getting this exactly right, but the active player rolls dice and they get to activate like 2 of them, and everybody else gets to pick 1 to write down their board. So it's like this little bit of engagement as it goes around the table, and you're trying to complete rows just like in Quicks with just a few little twists in how the scoring works. And so I bought that, taught it to my family, and it just became something that in Amsterdam when we were there, and then we went to Copenhagen afterwards, like basically every night once we got back from whatever we were doing that day, we would like have some wine, have some drinks, and we would just play like round after round of 21. And it was exactly like that feeling I'm describing of like, there's nothing about this game in particular that I think is like amazing, memorable, but just like having that as sort of like the backdrop of like, we're like in this Airbnb in these new places, like what would it kind of like aided to that like feeling that I always try and capture when I'm on vacation of like, what would it be like to live here? And like sitting around like playing this game like in our living room, for the night or whatever. It was just really memorable and fun. And yeah, so I mean that's just kind of like one gaming vacation memory that I'll cherish.
That's awesome. I love the idea too of a game being the portal to basically experiencing the feeling of what it might be like to live in this space. I think that's so cool. That's sort of like this. I hadn't considered that before, and it like neutralizes your discomfort almost in a way, as like the space can kind of like fade into the background in a nice way, and you get to focus on the game. And that's good, Jake. Okay, one for me. So I've talked a lot on this podcast about The Fox in the Forest, and I'm talking about it again because this is a 2-player trick-taking card game that my wife, Maya, and I really love to play. And one thing that Maya and I really love is travel games that we can just pull out of a box, whip a rubber band or a hair tie around, and that's enough, right? Like a deck of cards that we can keep tidy. It's great because it's easy to chuck in a backpack for Maya and her bag and pull it out at any given time. So I have a memory of flying back. I grew up in Oregon on the West Coast, and I now live on the East Coast. And a memory of just on the plane, playing right back, just playing game after game after game of the Fox in the Forest. Technically, that game comes with a few tokens, but you really don't need them. You just need the deck of cards. So I'll never forget sort of just like hunting through a backpack for the hair tie wrapped copy of the Fox in the Forest deck and pulling it out. That's one Maya and I really, really enjoy. And it's one we'll probably break our 2-player rule on to bring with us on this trip. So for whatever reason, Fox in the Forest has kind of become our de facto travel game, at least for us, where we can sort of escape into just comfort of playing a known game together that's easy and a little bit competitive, maybe slightly more competitive than some of the other games that we're bringing because we're just playing together.
That's awesome. And also amazing how that game for you now has the added warmth of all the other past trip experiences, right? And like that's just baked into it, just the feeling of doing that before and these other places that you've been.
Totally. Which I feel like is the strength of board games being this like object, this thing that we do and can sort of take on that like almost totemic power. It's cool.
Another highlight for me on vacation, I guess, is not one games that I brought, but I would call them like found games. I just have so many good memories of being on vacations, particularly again with my family, of these moments where like unplanned, where like all of a sudden playing a game or engaging in some kind of competition. This happened most recently in Denver when I was there with my parents, sister, and wife on just a very brief kind of getaway. And we were at kind of a brew pub type of place in a cool area of town towards the end of the night. And I see on the shelf, they've got all these like classic board games. And I'm like, oh, maybe we should like play one of these. And I see the perfect game, and that is Jenga. So I bring over Jenga to this like wobbly table. We're like sitting on bar stools and we start playing this game of Jenga, and it just becomes one of like the most, as Jenga so typically does, became like just this super epic, like larger than life experience where everybody's just like pulling off. Like, I mean, Jenga has this thing, right, where you're like at the end of the game and you're like, yes, if I pull this one piece, then I'm definitely not going to lose because it's definitely falling over. And then it comes back to you like 3 or 4 more times. And that happened. And like my sister, she'll play games with me, but not like a huge gaming enthusiast by any means. She's like on her like phone, like videotaping like my mom like pulling like add it to like her Instagram story, and like, you know, it's just creating this like moment of, you know, shared excitement and just a completely heightened evening from, you know, if we had just sat around and had a beer and talked. You know, it was all of a sudden we were like connecting over this like really fun shared thing. So I always like to keep my eyes open for something like that, whether it's Jenga or, you know, it's shuffleboard outside the motel that I played like, you know, with my mom as like a young kid, or, you know, challenging my dad to like a pinball tournament when we find like a pinball machine in like the back of some kind of like dusty bar. Just those moments of found gaming experience on a trip are always, you know, memorable trip highlights for me. So keep your eyes open, I guess, is the moral of that story.
Jenga is such a good one too, Jake, just in general for vacation, because it's also a great spectacle. Like games that you don't have to be playing to enjoy work really well on vacation too, where not everyone maybe is in for learning the rules of a new game, but if they can even just enjoy watching other people play it, and Jenga's like the perfect example of that. Jenga's fun even when you're not playing. It's fun to watch other people play Jenga and see their worry, and you have such a direct input. We didn't talk about bringing coconuts, which is another dexterity game, but I almost want to. It's like kind of a similar thing going on.
That's yeah. And ironically too, I mean, Jenga meets so many of our criteria, especially in like table space, right? It's literally like a 2-inch by 2-inch square is like all the tabletop space you need to play that game. And talk about like a larger payoff than you get from the footprint.
You could even play on the floor. Like it's comfortably. Yeah. Okay. I have another one. This is okay. How do I put this? My family, so I often go home for Christmas. Well, historically I would for like the winter break. And my family doesn't tend to play a lot of games, my dad's family. But one Christmas Eve, we probably 5 or 6 years ago, Ma and I had brought the Resistance, and we were just like, what if we just tried? Let's just try playing the Resistance together. Sometimes weird things can happen on like vacations and holidays, right? Where people get into different headspaces. They're willing to go a little bit out of their comfort zone. So it's a nice opportunity to maybe present something that in a normal context, people might not be totally open for, but for whatever reason, because they're on vacation, they're willing to try something new. They're open to trying. And we just had the most fun game of the Resistance. It was probably the only modern board game that I've had my dad play outside of my own games in years. And we just had so much fun being ridiculous in the Resistance, and the classic loop of the Resistance, except the added layer of your parents trying to deceive each other. And my sister was like really into it, trying to subvert basically the belief that my dad was a spy. And it's just great watching sort of your family in a new social context. And for me, that's maybe where I have started to gravitate towards memorable experiences with games, because it's fun that we sort of will always have that memory to like look back on that one particular Christmas where everyone was into it. Tensions get really high, which is something, especially with Resistance, where I don't know that I would bring it now. Like, we were talking about games that we should bring, and we were thinking, well, maybe we should bring the Mind. And I think the Mind meets a lot of the criteria, but the Mind also has the ability for someone to feel bad if it goes wrong pretty often, right? Like if someone's messing it up over and over again.
I totally I'm going to interrupt you because I just like so totally disagree with that characterization of the
You
Mind.
think the Mind? Yeah.
Unlike Crew or something like that, Mission Deep Sea or whatever, Search for Plane X or whatever it is. Like the Mind is impossible for one person to mess up alone or like not understand the situation. Like it's always the combination of at least two people, right? Because not just like, oh, why did you play that card first? It's like, well, why didn't you play the card you had before me? I don't know. I think it's like, for me, it's like really sweet in that way, and that like it kind of really brings people together. And at least when I play it, I never feel like anyone's at fault and just like, oh, let's try again.
Maybe I'll throw a rubber band around it and chuck it in the pile.
Okay, can I share one more? And I just think because it's sort of a different category of games, and that is games. So I think one of the special things about vacation is that you get to spend more time with people, like a lot of time with people that you don't always get to. So recently I got to go to a friend's bachelor party. And this was I traveled down to Austin, Texas. It was basically 5 very close friends, but who are now, from growing up, who are now living in all different parts of the country. So we got to meet up and just spend like 3 days together hanging out, which is just so, as you can imagine, like just so fun and like fulfilling to like connect with these people that I really love that I don't get to see often, and to like sort of get back into that like headspace of like, oh yeah, like, we used to hang out like every day, like in middle school and stuff. And what I found, like, I guess the memorable experience was I brought the game So Clover, which is I've talked about before on this podcast, like one of my favorite sort of party games, one of my favorite word games to play with people. And like the thing that was so great about this particular game was that the game itself created an inside joke that sort of carried throughout the rest of the trip, like bringing us like closer, like all on the inside of this joke. And basically what happened was it's So Clover is like always a tricky one to explain, but basically the main gist of it is you have 2 words and you have to come up with one word that brings them both together. And so anyway, and you do that 4 times, all on four different leaves of your 4-leaf clover board. And the clue that just like got everybody absolutely like cracking up hysterically, and that carried forward throughout the trip, was my friend had the card trailer and syrup together, and he put ranch, like as in like ranch dressing, which is something that'll be very familiar to all American listeners and maybe not so much to others, but it's sort of like a white syrup sauce type of thing. And so basically just like for the rest of the trip, like anytime somebody wanted I don't know, like people are like going out of their way to like order a side of ranch and stuff. It's like, yeah, let me get a side of trailer syrup. Just like, like what? It's like, what is that? Oh man, it's just some trailer syrup.
Trailer syrup's a pretty good name for ranch, to be honest.
Yeah, it's right. It's amazing.
Yeah,
and just like having,
well.
I don't know if that, having that joke come out of this game was really memorable. And I think next time around, those guys, like, it's very likely that somebody will be, making that
Drop
same
trailer
joke
syrup. Yeah.
like years from now. It's like a little throwback reference that all came out of this like one small gaming experience.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, social games on vacation are almost like the best. Maybe we should add extra points for that. I'm thinking even of things like Celebrity, which is a game that goes by lots of different names, but that's a game that you don't even have to bring with you, really. So long as you know there's going to be a piece of paper and a pencil. And if there's enough people, it can be so much fun to just spend a night sort of playing through that game. That's a folk game. If you've never heard of it, just look up Celebrity. It also goes by, like, there's a printed version called Monikers, but I think it's really fun to make up the game yourself. This is a game where you write different names or even shows or something on a card, and then there's different rules based on the round with what you can do and how much information you can reveal. And it sort of builds these in jokes as you go. But I think you need a large enough group and the right mindset, and then it's just perfect.
Yeah, Celebrity is definitely like, or Monikers, or however you prefer, is definitely like, it's like in joke generator, the game. It's amazing. Highly recommend if you haven't played that.
Totally.
Just to like, it almost like guarantees creating that experience like I described from So Clover, right? It's like,
yep.
Somebody like touches their chin and everybody's like, Count Chocula, for like the rest of the thing, or like whatever. Yep. It's just like amazing.
So awesome. Okay, my final memory. When I was moving, so at one point I moved from Oregon, which is on the very west coast of the United States, to Texas, which is in the middle of the country in the southern part of the United States. So it's a pretty long drive, like 17 hours. And in between those two places is this beautiful national park in Utah called Arches National Park. Jake, have you ever been to Arches?
No, I haven't even been to Utah. It's definitely something I need to correct.
At least for the national parks, which are just incredible. Yeah. And so Arches is this place with these beautiful arch-shaped geological wonders, really. And Maya and I were going to be camping in Arches because it was just a convenient stop on the road trip between Oregon and Texas. And we had recently picked up a copy of a game that we really enjoy, or really enjoyed at the time, called Biblios. And for whatever reason, that whole trip, that whole day while we were driving, stuck in the car, we were just talking about Biblios, talking about sort of how the different strategies we were thinking of trying while playing Biblios. And we sort of like built it up. And I don't even know if Biblios is the best travel game. It's sort of, you need this little board for 5 different dice that set the value of these differently colored cards. But hyping up Biblios in our travels, then arriving at Arches at nighttime where we couldn't see anything, was sort of the perfect excuse to pull it out, play Biblios by camplight, by like flashlight in the tent. And it was just so fun. I'll just never forget playing Biblios in that context. We played like 2 or 3 games, went to bed, and then woke up, and then in the daylight of the new day, got to go outside and actually experience Arches. So I feel like that's kind of like your Paris example, Jake, where it's a little bit about the game, but it's more the context that you're playing in that becomes the memory in and of itself.
I just can't help but think that Mark, the green tank from Board Game Barrage, who we know is a listener of this podcast,
fist bumping.
I think he's one tear rolling down his cheek right now. It's probably the most beautiful story he's ever been told.
I sure hope so. And yeah, Biblios is an amazing game. Mark from Board Game Barrage is top game of all time, and for good reason. I said to Maya right before we started recording, Jake, I was like, maybe we should bring Biblios just to see how it works with this group. And she's like, well, we'll see. But I think it's a game that I want to spend more time revisiting. It's a really good one.
Yeah. I'd like to try it sometime.
Yeah, you've never played it, right?
No, but just on, Mark's recommendation alone, seems like worth giving it a shot.
I think there's this 2 phases to it. I think you'd dig it.
Cool.
Okay.
Well, should we move this conversation forward and talk about some games that we're going to recommend as travel games or games that we like to use? Like, what is in your bag right now? Like, what are your for sure locks that you're bringing onto this trip? And tell us about the trip too. Like, what's the context?
And do you want me to do all my games and then you'll talk about like all of your games?
Sure. Yeah, we can do it that way.
Well, so we're gonna go on a drivable trip. So yay for us, we can take more games. We're gonna go to Cape Cod. We're gonna stay in a house that we rented with my wife, our son, who's 1, and then her sister, her twin sister, and then her family. So there'll be like 5 adults, 3 kids who are too young to play games. So it's really the audience is the 5 adults. My little nephew's getting so close, Jake. I'm so excited for the next trip. I think I'm going to start looking for more kids games and getting my headspace around that and testing them with my nephew. And I'm so excited. But this trip, we're not doing that. I think mostly we'll be out sort of hanging out at the beach or maybe going on a few walks or, but yeah, I think so. Games will, like we were talking about, be mostly when we get back from another activity or at night. So maybe we can go one by one. The first game that Maya and I definitely agreed we had to take, and this is a theme that we're developing here, is it's a roll and write game. And I think roll and writes do really well because they're easy to learn, they're easy to teach, and they solve that problem of jump in, jump out, very scalable. You can have like so many different people play them. And I say jump in, jump out, not in the middle of a game, but they're usually so quick that if someone wants to just catch the next game, it's really easy to play 3 or 4 games. So the game we're taking is our favorite roll and write game right now, and that is Trails of
Tucana.
Yes, you got it. Which kind of has a vacation-y feel to it of itself. It's at least an island game. Trails of Tucana is this amazing roll and write game where you have this map in front of you, a personal player sheet, and it depicts all these different types of terrain. And every turn, you flip over 2 cards that tell you 2 types of terrain you have to connect. So like you have to connect forest to desert or forest to forest, and you're trying to make connections between different places on your map. And Trails of Tucana is just like the most mouth-wateringly perfect little puzzle. Where I think it's almost perfect for vacation because when you first play it, the puzzle seems huge and like you could never solve it. And by play 3 or 4 or 5, you really have sunk your teeth in and know if a particular game is going right, if you're taking a smart risk. So within very quickly, you can understand the decision space in an appetizing way that I think allows people who maybe don't play games often to see the appeal of like, oh, I could really dig my teeth into some of these games. So that's going to get played for sure. I'm so excited.
Still haven't played it and don't really know much about it, but I'm glad that you're still liking it.
We're going to play it. We're going to play it one day. My next game is, sometimes I feel like abstract games are more approachable to people who don't play games as often because they fit a little bit more with what people think of as sort of games, of classic games that often tended to be abstracts. But I'm not bringing chess or anything like that. What Maya and I are going to bring is Azul. I think Azul is sort of like the perfect beach game for whatever reason. Even the aesthetic of Azul to me feels beachy. Maybe this is because I grew up playing Rummy Cub with my family. Jake is looking dubiously at me, feeling like this doesn't fit at all.
No, I mean, it's not a game I would bring to the beach.
For me, okay, I wouldn't bring it to the physical beach.
Okay, that's what I thought when you say beach game. I'm like picturing like you're like playing on a towel. It just feels like a little too like
it's definitely not a good
big and like sandy. Yeah, I think any game you told me is like beach game, I'd probably be like no.
Railroading. But Azul, yeah, at least you wouldn't ruin anything because they're bakelite tiles. But it's a good beach house game.
Yes.
So it's really approachable, it's fairly easy to teach. I think it's a little bit higher complexity, but because this audience has a history of playing games with bakelite tiles at the beach because of Rummy Cub, I think Azul will be the perfect hit. And importantly, Maya loves this game enough that she could teach it, which I think is definitely appetizing and enticing for others too. It's like kind of boring if I'm always the one teaching the games. So Azul is one that Maya is excited enough to get to the table. She can teach it. And I think it works really well for colorblind players. And one of the people who will be with is colorblind. So I think that's a nice little addition there. And who doesn't love Azul?
I mean, Azul is a great game. I don't know that it makes many of my travel game lists.
It's too big, right? Unless you're driving.
It's just too big. And I just think, I don't know. Something about Azul, I feel like it's just, even if you're driving there, I don't know, like it's a game I love, a game I love to show people, but I don't know why I'm having this like a little bit disconnect of like, I don't know that I want to play Azul on a vacation. Maybe it's because I don't know what it is. I can't put my finger on it.
Keep thinking. If you figure out what's going to
This is
stop
great
you from taking
content.
Azul, yeah. Keep thinking about it. I will say that Azul would not make the cut if I was flying. It's definitely a driving, traveling game for me.
For sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
So then also, you know,
I think maybe it's just two heads down and too like mean for like just like the vacation vibe that I'm going for. Like perfect for like a game night at my house, especially with like people who I'm gonna, you know, that will be friends. We'll play the game and we'll part at the end of the evening. They'll come back and play it another time. I just don't know that, you know. I don't know. I think that's what it is. It's just like the heads down, like calculation and like meanness of it that makes it like not really fit into that like vibe of like we're just like relaxing doing a game while like enjoying each other's company on vacation.
Well, then could I sell you, Jake, on a vacation game of Cascadia?
I think that's a better fit for sure for me.
Great. Well, we're taking Cascadia too because why not? Maya really loves Cascadia. What's up?
I was gonna, you give me. I've got a thought after you're finished telling why.
Well, Maya and I both love Cascadia. Obviously, longtime listeners of the show will know it's a game that she and I have played over 100 times now. And we've actually, a few of those plays have been with this part of our family. So we're excited to take it. It's the sort of game where if they want to play again, we'll be really excited to get it to the table with them. And if not, I could definitely see Maya and I just playing a game of Cascadia together one night and really enjoying how relaxing that game is. I think Cascadia, I forget the actual episode number, but just Google, if you're curious, Cascadia Decision Space to hear more of my thoughts on that game. Obviously, I really adore it. And it sort of heads down in the best way, where if Jake is saying Azul is maybe a little too confrontational, Cascadia is not confrontational at all. You can just sort of relax in the beautiful Beth Sobel art and make your decisions without much interruption from other players. So Cascadia makes the cut. It's again, if we were flying, it might not make the cut. There's few too many different types of pieces, but driving, perfect. Chuck it in the trunk.
It's a smaller box than Azul, right?
Yeah, just slightly,
just a little bit.
Just a little bit.
I feel like that's a big difference because like one can fit comfortably into a backpack, and I feel like Azul is just like a little too chonky for a backpack. A standard backpack.
Azul really could have been published in a smaller box, and it would have been so perfect for traveling, like throwing it in a backpack. It's a perfect weight game too for that sort of thing.
And that
it's
might even be
it's not that big.
That might even be part of the Azul issue for me. Is like if I'm bringing out this big box, people might already be like, "No, I'm tired,
too big."
You know what I mean? Like before you even get to like the teach.
Well, what about a little? I think
that's part of it. Well, I was gonna say on Cascadia. I was just in Kansas. Where I like to drive 4.5 hours both ways, at least a few times every summer to play with my old kickball team, the Love Garden Squids. Squid, nasty, baby. Anyway, so after the game, I was talking to one of my teammates, Walker, who's a little older than me. I think he's in like 40, maybe, roughly. And he's got a couple of older kids, like I want to say like 8 and
9,
10 or something, maybe a little older, and then a really young kid. But he was telling me that he had just had a game night and knows I'm into games, and they played Settlers of Catan, and was asking me like, he's like, what? People ask me this all the time, and I never know how to answer it. But people are always like, what's like the big game right now? And it's, it's like such a tough question to answer, or like, what's your favorite game right now? Because we're like playing through so much stuff. And like the game that I'm super excited about right now isn't necessarily what I'm going to recommend for like a family. But after like thinking about it for a second, I told him like the game that you have to get, Cascadia.
Yeah, that's a great recommendation.
Yeah.
Even the hex tiles will be such a nice translation from Catan to that, even though they share nothing in common in the context of the game. See, even having that one piece in common will be so helpful for them, I bet.
I think so. Yeah. So anyway,
that's awesome.
I thought you'd be proud of me.
I'm very proud of you, and I think that's like the perfect answer to that question right now. Oh, okay. Next game. If Azul's too big of a box, what about a little tin full of adorable sushi art?
Oh, that's good.
So we're going to bring Sushi Go.
That's a
Maya was
perfect one.
Maya was hesitating because we primarily played Sushi Go in 2 players a few years ago, and she didn't love it, and she kind of was ready to get rid of it. And then we covered it on the show, and you and I had this awesome experience where we realized how delicious the decisions are in Sushi Go, but also how it's one of the most approachable games you can imagine. Like, you could teach Sushi Go to anyone in about 30 seconds, and immediately even the sort of like risk reward of different decisions are really clear typically. Of this is a pair, you're going for tempura, this is a set because it's sashimi, this gives you 2 points right now. Like, it really lays it all out. You can play it quickly, you could play it anywhere, because it's just a deck of cards. I mean, you could take this to the beach and play on blankets if you wanted to. Not if it's windy, but you could get away with it probably.
I think I just don't like the beach. I'm just not like a go hang
not
out
gonna
and
play a
sit
game
on the beach person.
I'm going to shut up about the beach.
Everything just sounds bad to me. Like,
what about, have you played Railroad Inc?
Yeah.
You can play Railroad Inc on the beach.
There are like games that like you could play on the beach, but I think there's no game that exists I would like rather play on the beach.
Yeah. You'd rather go swimming or
maybe I mean, there'd be like like dexterity games, like beach volleyball.
Sure.
That's what I would do. That's the game I would choose to play on the beach. Okay. Or soccer, or, a dexterity game for sure.
Totally. Well, we'll play it at home. I don't think I was actually going to bring Sushi Go to the beach, but I think this is just a really good one because it's so light that like the lift is it's about as minuscule as you get while still being a lot of fun, and you could play it for 45 minutes, an hour, and still have a blast.
Definitely.
Okay, I'm going to go quickly through these next ones, okay? Okay, so and we're bringing in Enchanted Flumes. Enchanted Flumes is just, that's a game I designed. It's really fun. It's a card game. It's compact. It does take up some space on the table, but I think it's a small concession. Next, Broom Service. This is sort of our reach game. Like, if everyone got really into it, I think it would be the perfect game for this group, but everyone would have to want to play a game. Like, if we'd played a few of the other games I've listed and they were sort of like, okay, like, knock us out, we're going to have a game night. Maya and I agreed that Broom Service is almost the perfect game for this group, and the hijinks of Broom Service, it's not too heavy or too serious that the group's not going to have a ton of fun tripping all over each other. And it's not so light that it doesn't feel like this full game experience. So Broom Service is making the cut, but it's definitely a reach. Service. Like,
that was my reach game I brought to the bachelor party. We did not get it played, but like exact same thought process. Like, if we're going to do like a game night, it's just like, it's the pinnacle now for me, right?
Totally. I would be happy playing Broom Service in any context. So I guess it's not surprising it makes it with me on vacation. But with that said, it'll make me happy just to have it. And if it gets played, that's a huge bonus. Okay, now the final game we're bringing. I suggested we bring Blue Lagoon. And Maya was like, no, we're not bringing Blue Lagoon. We'll play Azul if you're going to play Blue Lagoon. But I was shocked, Jake. She said, this is my reach game, and grabbed Babylonia.
Of course.
What the heck? I'm so excited. I didn't even have to grab it myself. So we're going to bring Babylonia. I do not think that this game is going to get played. It's like too big. It's slightly too heavy. But if it does, it'll be so fun. This is a Ren and Knizia game that's like one of my favorite games of the year. It'll get talked about on the show again, and we'll talk about it more. It's a tile-laying game. It's great. You should look up Babylonia. Not enough people know about Babylonia. But now we should talk about Jake's games, because that was a lot of time spent on mine.
That's awesome. No, I think that's great. And I think it gives people an awesome depiction where your head's at. I think bringing a reach game is interesting because on one hand, like when you bring a reach game, like, you're telling yourself a story. You're like, this is the perfect set of circumstances. We're all sitting around like bored. And then I say, hey, do you guys want to like try a little game of, it's really not that big. Like, we'll have fun. And then somebody else is like, yeah, I'm down. Let's do it. And like, that's all well and good, but it's probably not going to happen like that. And like so I just think like, to some people, it's like the shelf of shame versus like shelf of opportunity. Like, some people are going to be happy just to have it. Other people, like driving home at the end of the trip, like packing it back up, might be like, oh, like we didn't get.
Why did I bring this box?
Yeah, or not even like, why did I bring the box? But just like, it could represent like, dang it. Like,
yeah, sure.
I don't know. I find myself like sometimes in like the latter camp generally. Like, if I'm going home to my parents' house for like a weekend or something, and I bring like a bunch of games and we just like don't play like any of them, right, or whatever, my parents are like, maybe my family is just gonna be like, we'll play quicks or like, something. They're like, okay. And I'm like putting it all back, just like, dang it. Like, that's kind of sad in some ways. So I don't know. I just share that perspective too.
Do you have a copy of Quicks that lives at your parents' house?
They own it now.
They own it, yeah.
They
Nice.
picked
Nice,
up a
nice.
copy. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So I just recently visited my parents, and I have another planned trip coming up next weekend. I'm going to Boulder to celebrate a friend's wedding. And something really, this is just an aside, something kind of strange that happened. So the friend I'm going to his wedding in Boulder is a friend from undergrad, which was like the gaming period of my life where everybody just played only Settlers of Catan endlessly and over and over and over again. But anyway, I guess that group has moved on, but still enjoys games, because I got a message from another friend from college that's also attending the wedding that said like, hey Jake, I know you like games. Do you want to play Power Grid on Saturday before the wedding, or maybe Sunday before the wedding, something like that? And I was like, somehow I haven't ever played it, but I'm definitely down. He's like, great, like we're gonna have like 2 tables of Power Grid going. It's like, what the heck? Like y'all just moved over from Settlers of Catan to Power Grid and been like
That's
playing
amazing.
this the whole time. Like, I'm gonna get so schooled, but yeah, I'm really looking forward to it.
That's what a glow up. That's awesome.
Yeah. So anyway, and like after they said that, now I like vaguely remember like years ago talking to some of them and them being like, yeah, Power Grid's like really cool, like our favorite game. And I guess
That's awesome.
they just
Stuck to
finding
it.
that. Yeah. So looking forward to my first experience with Power Grid. But anyway, some of the games that I bring, and I guess I'll just start here. Like, there are 3 games that are basically always live in my backpack. And I think and I bring these to work on the off chance that like there's an opportunity to do some gaming. I'm still kind of new at my position, and so far there hasn't been, but I still bring these 3 games to work every day.
Nice.
And which is, it's not every day, I work in the office anyway, but those 3 games are Silver and Gold, lives in my backpack, a really great flip and write, just lightning quick, I've talked about on a recent episode, by Phil Walker Harding, one of my most enjoyable games of the year, just perfect to like whip out and play at a moment's notice, like basically 0 table space needed, that teaches like less than 5 minutes, perfect. The second one is The Mind. Similar reasons. I think The Mind is one of my favorite games to show people who are like game skeptical, or like, maybe I'll try, you know what I mean? Just like, I just think it's such a good like distillation of like the idea that like modern board games are doing something cool and different than the games you played growing up as a kid, or that are like in maybe the ones like that you have in your cupboard for your kids to play right now, if you haven't been like sort of awoken to the board gaming revolution, so I think The Mind is great for that, and it's just a fun little experience. And the last one is Enchanted Blooms. I also have that in my bag, so because I'm a shill, so I'll just give you another plug for that. But really, same reason you play. I really do enjoy it. It's simple, it's pretty, and I think the thing that is really nice about it for this context is it like shares a lot in common with like traditional card games. So it's like a little bit less off-putting potentially. Like, it just like people will lower their guard a little bit more if they've played like traditional card games to that one, as opposed to some of the others that I mentioned.
My heart's literally melting right now, knowing that you always take a copy of Enchanted Blooms to work. I've never been happier.
Yeah. And then I think when I think about my upcoming trip to the wedding, games that I'm likely to bring, I might bring those because they just stay in my backpack. They're in their little spot. And then I think I'll also bring So Clover. I've just had such fun experiences introducing that to people. And I think like this is probably a slightly rowdier crowd. So, when you add in alcohol to the equation, like that is, I guess we didn't mention that, but that's something that also like is going to make certain games better and other games worse. Most games, like if not like having a drink, but like people are drunk, I think most games get much worse, and some games get much better. And I think So Clover is a game that really sings in that kind of more like party game atmosphere, because it's just like funny and silly, and people get frustrated and people laugh. So I think I'd bring that. The last one I want to mention, this is actually not a game I own, but it was a game my sister, who I mentioned before, brought out just this past weekend when I was at my parents' house. After, it was kind of this cool setup where when I found this like amazing deal on Facebook Marketplace where I was able to pick up Isle of Cats, Lost Cities, and
No
No
thanks.
Thanks for like $35, and I literally like
It's crazy.
picked it up on the way out of town. So those were the games that I brought on this last trip. Didn't play Isle of Casts, didn't even like think about trying to play it because it's just way too much for that setting. But I did play the other two games and had really fun experience with both. We also played Ramen, your new game. I played that with my sister, and that was really fun too. And it was kind of a fun follow-up after teaching her Lost Cities, because we kind of did Lost Cities one day and we did Ramen the next. They sort of actually have like a similar vibe to them, where you have like a shared board that both people are interacting with, as well as like your own personal hand. So that was really nice. So it was great. We played No Thanks with the family.
How'd it go over?
It was weird. I really liked the game. I think the game is fantastic. If you don't know about No Thanks, it's kind of like a more classic gateway game at this point. But basically, whoever the active person is flips over a card from the deck that's numbered like 3 through 35. And then you have to either take that card into your personal collection, which is bad because you get negative points for every value of card you have at the end, or you put one of your wager cube things, like I don't know what you call them. You have like these black discs, chips. You could put one chip on it and say no thanks, and then the next person has to either put a chip on it or take it. If they take the card, they get to keep all the chips on them. So at a certain point, it becomes like worth it to take the card. I think it's a really clever little game. The other wrinkle is like you only count up the lowest value of your run. So if you have a 9, getting a 10 doesn't hurt you at all. So if there's chips on it, like you just take it probably. And there's some like really clever things, but I actually think like a lot of the more like the strategy there was lost on the people I was playing with in the first play. Like where like if somebody has like the 34 or the right and the 35 comes up, like they just like would take it first try, instead of like, no, like if you actually say no thanks, like other people will like continue to say no thanks because it's so devastating.
Yeah, you have to milk the card.
You have to milk it, and that like wasn't really happening.
Yep.
And then we played it again, and like somebody was like out of it early and just like started doing like random chaotic stuff and just like try to like take like basically everything to create these like massive runs. So anyway, I think it's great game. I think I would like want to play it with gamers again. But anyway, so that was great that they were willing to play those games with me. Even my dad played that one. And then my sister brought out a game. I was like so impressed. It's a game that I've heard of but hadn't tried myself, called The Chameleon. Have you heard of The Chameleon?
No. Okay, tell me, what is it?
So it is like an early, I think it's one of like the early like Prospero Hall Target exclusive games, like before Prospero Hall was like the Prospero Hall that was like really revered in the hobby. And it's like a social deduction game, very similar to something like Werewords or Insider. Basically the way it works is there will be a common card flipped up that will be a category of things. Like it might be states, and then there'll just be like 25 different states on the card in a grid, like United States states, like Alaska, Alabama, whatever, right? Random ones. Or it might be like fairy tales, and it's like 25 like concepts from like fairy tale, like Frog Prince and whatever, Cinderella, or like witches, something like that. And basically everybody gets dealt a card that you can use to, then you like roll a couple dice and you use the dice to and your reference card to see which of the words in the middle is like the word that everybody is trying to guess. Except for one person doesn't get a reference card. They get a card that just says like, you are the chameleon. And then the way the game works is everybody just says like goes around the table, starting with the first person. You just say like one word that clues the other people into the fact that you're not the chameleon, but doesn't like indicate what the word is to the chameleon. At the end of everybody saying a word, everybody gets to guess who the chameleon is. At that point, if they're wrong, the chameleon wins. If they're right, the chameleon gets one chance to like guess the actual word. It was great, man. It was very...
Do they have to guess it to win?
At that point, they have to guess it to win, or else they lose.
Okay.
It was great. I think we played it with like, I guess it would have been 5 people, but I really like Insider, but I think like this is just like better in a variety of ways. I think it's just like works a little bit better in terms of like streamlining the rules and like the guessing process at the end. It keeps it to like, instead of like doing like 20 questions thing, which when I recently have tried breaking out of that, like a lot of times you just like get to the answer like way before there's ever any time pressure and the game kind of breaks. Like here it's like every time, every round, it's always fun and exciting to like say the word and like think through it. I think like there's just more opportunity to like actually like be strategic and think. But yeah, I mean, like it was fantastic. I really highly recommend it. And I just think it would be such a perfect little social deduction style game to play on future outings, like, you know, trips with my family, or, you know, if I had a copy, maybe I'll seek out a copy. I think it would be perfect for this, like going to a wedding type vibe.
Looking at it too, the form factor of the box is almost exactly what we wanted Azul to be, where it's like small and it's not a card game type box. It's not even the sort of like double card game box that you might see the Fox in the Forest or Airland and Sea or something like that. But it's a small, nice, elegant looking board game box. This is a really attractive package too, Jake.
Yeah.
I want to look this game up. It's super cool looking.
And there are funny like little things that just happen in our play. Like you might just like one of the categories we got was like authors, and like the word was like Tolstoy. So it's like some people might just like not know that much about Tolstoy. And somebody said mountains. And I was like, okay, like, is that like because like of the landscape of like Russia or something? Like, you know, that could maybe be it, but I wasn't sure. And we get to the end and people were like, mountains person, like you're the chameleon. And she was, and she's like, or she wasn't. And we were like, oh, what was the clue? She was like, oh, like I thought that like it was like the word, she'd like messed up the like reference card part of it and like thought it was Tolkien.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah. So there's like a lot of like comedy. Or like another time, I think something was like, it was like the category is like spooky or scary or something. And like somebody who like ended up not being the chameleon's like word was like frightening. It's like, well, yeah, like all of these words are like, in a way, it's like that's just like a synonym for like the category. So I don't know. It's just like there's a lot of like laughing that happened over the game, and I mean that's kind of the best for these vacation games, I think. Or one of the things that they can do best is like get people laughing.
Totally. And it seems like there's the perfect amount of tension between you want to show that you're not the chameleon, but you don't want to give the chameleon too much information. So it's that really fraught sort of social structure. Great pick, Jake. That's cool.
Yeah.
Well, great pick to your sister. I guess
absolutely.
She gets all the credit. Yeah.
It's really just cool. Like a Lost or Fake Artist Goes to New York, which is the exact same thing, but you're like drawing a single line. Yeah. But that game also just breaks like so easily, I've found.
Yeah.
Where it just seems like with words, it's a little bit more nuanced and like a lot of times like, you know, harder to figure out the chameleon, or the chameleon would be like clever and like say something like similar to what other people were saying, but like just off from it.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's great. And you could easily make a mistake.
Yeah, totally. I think my dad got away with the Tolstoy being the chameleon because he put like, you know, not knowing what it was, but just like hearing like what everyone else was saying. He put like, you know, dense or something. And we're like, oh yeah, that's it for sure. You know, like, that's so awesome. It was great experience.
Oh, I'm so glad you guys got to have that experience. And it's really cool hearing. We've heard a little bit on the show about how your dad's not always one to jump straight into games. So it's fun to hear about him partaking too.
Yeah.
And yeah, I feel like with that's a solid show on vacation games. So, but I have a request for all of you who are listening, which is I really want to know what games you like taking on vacation. Maybe you'll inspire Jake and I for future vacations or other people. And the best place to let us know is in our Discord, honestly. That's a chat room that you can access from your browser. And there's a link to join it in our show notes. If you go to the episode channel, you could go in there and just give us your list of games. And maybe Jake and I, if we remember, we'll go in there and post our list of games for everyone to take a peek at in written form as well. But yeah, any final thoughts, Jay?
No final thoughts. So just I hope you have a great time on vacation, and yeah, definitely report back. Let us know if any of those ambitious selections actually get tabled.
Yeah, heck yeah, I will absolutely. And to all of you out there who are listening while traveling, I hope you had or have an awesome vacation too. And we'll see you next week for another awesome episode of Decision Space.
And as always, we would like to thank Hembry for our intro and outro song, Reach Out. Goodbye.
Bye.